Hello and welcome to the Create Invent podcast. Where we interview makers and creators and inventors and everything in between. Today we have Ryan Bates, and he runs a awesome store called Retro Built Games. I guess store, maker, conglomerate. How would you describe yourself, Ryan?
It was a store. I've scaled back, and it's primarily YouTube now, which is just education or edutainment.
Okay. And is this what you do full time, or do you have like a day job too?
I have a full-time day job, but this business started as a full-time job, and I ran it full-time for about 5 years.
Oh, that's interesting. So did you run it part time and then full time and then back to part time, or is it kind of a?
So the long story was I was working full-time as an engineer, and in my city, a makerspace opened up, just popped up out of nowhere, and it was Tech Shop, which I feel like you guys might have heard this name. They were kind of a big name brand, running like a gym kind of vibe membership for fabrication equipment. So they got a grant in our city, and they just showed up, and I was there like day one. So I was moonlighting there, teaching and doing whatever I could, because they give you a free membership if you teach so many hours. Nice. So after full-time work, I would go there. And then, I was just like messing around, learning stuff. Started making arcade cabinets. But big ones are always hard. So I made a small one. And then someone's like, you should put that on Kickstarter. So I did. So it was fully funded in a month, $28,000. And I just was head in my hands like every week at work. I'm like, I think I'm gonna quit this job and just do it. And then I did, and I ended up doing it for 5 years. The landscape changed drastically, and when I invested into doing this as a full-time business, I had always made the condition no decision will ever be an emotional decision. So when it's time to pull out because the landscape's changing, it's time to exit gracefully on my terms and not dwindle my finances or anything like that.
Right.
So it was like 2000.
You mentioned your city. You live in
Cincinnati?
Is that correct?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Pittsburgh, Cincinnati.
I'm originally from Cleveland area, but when I graduated, the first job was Pittsburgh. So here I am.
Okay.
Some of my favorite guests we've had are from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's right.
Pittsburgh. Yeah, Stephen Hawes from the Lumen Pickin' Place is in Pittsburgh also.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't even know. These people are usually keep to themselves, so
Yep.
it's hard to know. Oh, you're here. That's just how it is.
But yeah, no, that's interesting. So then you saw the landscape change, and you said, okay, I'm going to go back, get a full-time job, and run this as more or less, I guess, not a hobby, but basically an income-producing enterprise on the side. Is that accurate?
I'm really bummed out to hear that you had to scale back. I thought retro gaming could be as big as ever.
So the landscape was changing because the idea was no longer unique and novel. So it got out enough that other manufacturers, in particular Arcade 1-Up, basically saw that market and went full scale. So I didn't seek any venture capitalists or funding. I wanted to own the entire business myself. I wanted it to be a passion project, which is kind of a conflict of interest when you need to scale to be competitive. So I was always going to be 2 steps behind, and that's fine.
Okay.
But basically when Arcade 1-Ups started to appear in Walmarts, and Micro Center also started making their own arcade kits sold in stores. And Micro Center, and I talked with Micro Center about partnering, didn't work, just didn't agree. And basically everyone was doing what I was doing, but cheaper, and then they had all the connections to be in brick and mortar retail. So that was the signs of okay, it might get harder. And then we had leadership in the U.S. that decided to put 20% imports on everything coming from China. That's all my supplies. So costs go up 20% across the board.
Right.
So it was a number of these factors that were all right, I'm going to start looking for full-time employment again. Didn't give it up, just made the graceful scale back.
No, that's very. It's good of you to do that, and it seems like to me, if you go back at a normal job, all of a sudden you got this normal job and you've got this product line so you're probably financially it's probably a very good thing because you've got that main job support and something that can kind of continuous income. I'd have to assume.
You can assume correctly, and I mean any passion that you turn into full-time income, like I gotta make money to eat and pay bills. It changes how you feel about stuff. So exiting out was not a tough decision to basically come back and be nostalgic again about this hobby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I get that. It's interesting because I guess my quote unquote full-time job, I worked as an engineer for somebody else for a long time, or several different companies. And, now I write about technology full time, and it does kind of change how you think about it. It's a number of years ago, I guess it was years ago, a company said they wanted to, hire somebody else to help me with some stuff I was doing. And I contacted Pat. I was like, oh, you want to do this? He's like, well, I don't know about getting paid for it because that would just take the fun out of it. Because he writes what'd you say, 500,000 pages on your, not pages, words on your blog?
I think I'm up at about 700,000 or 800,000 words of blog posts now, I think was the math
That's a lot of words.
Word count told me.
Gosh, yeah, that's a lot of words.
But it's a lot of time, too. It's been over, 12, 13 years now or something. It's a long time.
Yeah. So what now that you have a full-time job, and can you tell us what you do now? I mean, engineer,
yeah,
I assume.
Listen, looking for the jobs was the hardest part because I was happy and content being in a field that I chose to be in. And I mean, this was the most fun I had ever had as an engineer, to kind of be in the games industry and like on the sidelines. And I was making stuff because as an engineer, the first jobs I had were, you're the lowest on the ranks. So you do the grunt work of like writing technical documents or traveling overseas for like a week at a time to get drawings approved by a manufacturer. And I was like, this isn't really what I want to do more design.
Yeah.
So eventually the job I have now is I'm a manager for a 16,000 square foot makerspace at Carnegie Mellon University. So that's a public facing position. Yeah. So I oversee all of fabrication, and it's basically the most advanced, the highest budget makerspace you can, and only something like academia can actually make makerspaces viable. So I'm just like, wow, I don't know how I got here.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, okay, you had a good job, extremely good job, but then, I mean, in some ways, it seems like you have an even better job now. I mean,
the one thing that working as an engineer at the time, just because I was inexperienced, I was out of college, and you don't get the best jobs then. I was always looking for a creative outlet, because sometimes like that itches at you if you can't do something creative. Right. And I didn't find that, but at this job, well, it's totally different now.
Oh yeah.
But I'm a full-time educator. Essentially, I teach other people the skills that I picked up, like learning with scraps, and I also teach the future set of engineers. So I still do a lot of engineering, but it's the much more like fun, razzle dazzle part that you can convince students like, you can do anything as an engineer. I'm just kind of squirreled my way into this position.
And then they graduate and start writing technical documents.
Hey, this is a reality. And this is what we try to say. Like, experience means a lot more than, your grades, but you got to get the grades first. Yeah,
that's right. No, I mean, I will say, when I graduated, the neat thing was when I was going through school, they had me do I did a co-op program where basically they employed me at a company, and I more or less they let me have the run of the machine shop, and they actually hired me afterwards. And it was neat because even though maybe I wouldn't have thought so before graduating, when you work in manufacturing, which was what that was, you get to really see the design process from start to finish. And I mean, it's small things, but it's all kind of custom machinery for making big time stuff. And I thought that was, I thought that was cool. Sometimes it was stressful too when they don't work, but that's another story.
Yeah, and that's something our students experience beforehand. A lot of their courses, they have to think of an idea and then execute it in, a prototyping manner. And a lot of these students, have to sleep in the bed they make, which is like, I didn't think this design through, but my ambition is up here. My skills are here. And it's really humbling to them. It makes them a better engineer to just understand the idea, the execution, the design have to all be copacetic. And experience is the only life lesson to get out of all that.
Yeah. I had another engineer tell me, more experienced engineer, somebody you very much look up to. He said, sometimes you just have to know when to step back and punt. And that's, that's right. You go down a path and you realize it's not working. A lot of the time you just have I can just a little bit more, but sometimes,
sometimes you have to employ that fishing metaphor.
What is that?
Fish or cut bait.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's always...
Or fish somewhere else.
Or fish somewhere, yeah.
Failure isn't failure, it's experience. Knowing not how to do something is still as useful. Because, if you don't have any experience, you'll likely start in the wrong spot. But if you failed a lot, well, that's experience, and you might start in the right direction when you step that first step. Right.
So at this point, how many hours a week do you think you work on retro built games?
It's a little. I'm playing catch up because I bought a house last year and I did a huge demolition. Thank you. Did a huge demolition project, but probably 4 hours a week.
Oh.
And that's really satisfying YouTube's algorithm, which is a relationship that's unhealthy for you, but you can't get out of it.
Yep.
And that's really just trying to keep up with posting a video, and overanalyzing what makes a video do well. And this is an unhealthy relationship, but
right.
anything I'm doing in the retro gaming world, I just make a video, and my main focus now is make it open source, because I leaned on a lot of what was open source, like building better on good ideas already, and I've had my stab at it. It was fun, and it's time to just put stuff back so someone else can take the next better step that I couldn't.
So you say most of your time is YouTube, et cetera, but you still do sell a decent amount of kits and such at this point, right? Or are you kind of stepping back from that a little bit?
Right now it's PCBs. So I sell a lot of circuit boards, which are half designs or half ideas spun off from retro gaming. But I wrote a book too, which was an accident. A publisher had someone say they can't do it. Can you finish this book? And I was like, wow, I'm so naive enough. I'll say yes, not knowing how much work it was. So it's really just education, how to make an arcade cabinet. What's it like to start from step one? That's really the main focus of my business. All the old kits, the little ones, I guess this one in this camera shot, I'm planning on just making completely open source. The designs are free.
Oh, nice.
And just do that.
But even with that, even if it's open source, people still buy the stuff. At least that's my assumption. Is that because not everybody wants to make their own PCB or can.
Yeah.
Even if you give them the recipe.
There's still a huge demand for kits because the kits were the ultimate convenience factor to get exactly what somebody wants, and then have that IKEA effect. Even if it's not anything special, that it's special to you because you put it together, has way more value to the individual. And that's really what was always the feeling people want from retro gaming, because you're always romantic to these old games, and that experience is kind of holding it close to you when you build it.
Right. We had a guest on, actually Pat wasn't even here a long time ago, a guy named Pocket 83. I don't know if he's from near Pittsburgh too, which is weirdly enough. But he's a huge. His channel's not about retro gaming, but he's a huge retro gaming guy. And he had a video just basically just saying, this will never be as good as it. I don't know. It was very, very philosophical, but basically like, you'll never capture that feeling again, which actually sounds kind of depressing.
It does, but man, when you come to terms to it, I think your approach is always for the best.
Well, what do you mean by that?
So let's do the probably going to be overanalyzed too much in the next year, but when the pandemic happened, retro gaming prices skyrocketed just to silly amounts, and you're buying these things, one, because I guess you have the extra time now because you're not commuting, and some people are just stuck at home. So you're buying these things because, okay, I'll pick up this hobby and hopefully relive some of the nostalgia I had back then. But when you're paying these prices, you have to ask yourself, is this price equivalent to the experience that I'm remembering or that I'm just going to get from owning it? And when you come to terms, like, yeah, it's not about owning it. It was about, sitting on your floor in your living room and playing it. That is an impossible memory to relive. And, the types of love, like romantic love and obsessive love, if you've ever heard of those, sometimes it's best to step back and look at how you feel about those video games and what is the experience you're trying to get.
Yeah, that's a good
I built my arcade cabinet about 13 years ago, and I love it. It's fantastic. It's fun. But, about 8 or 9 years after that, an old friend of mine we've been friends since the 3rd grade. He flew down here, and we played through Contra from the Nintendo Entertainment System, not the arcade, for the 2-player Contra. That was the most nostalgic thing I have ever done with my arcade cabinet. Playing with somebody I used to play a game with 30-something years ago again. It's fantastic.
And I'm glad you had that experience. And I'm glad you said it, too, because, yeah, a lot of those memories were shared.
Yes.
They were more than the game. They were experienced, like, with everything around you. I mean, anything you do when you're at a young age has a really deep impact on your brain. It's just hard to realize until you have time to, like, reflect it and look at it at scale.
Yeah.
But my cabinet doesn't have the burn marks from people leaving their cigarettes on them, like the arcades.
And I mean,
when I was a kid.
Yeah, in your memory, it's usually like the polished, cleaner memory. Like, I don't see that stuff. Like the smell of an arcade, which is like 14-year-olds and like body odor and and like Red Bull burps now. So it's
yeah. I had on my list. I was going to ask you, why do people like retro gaming? But you've feel like we've covered that quite nicely. So.
Yeah, I think we've got deep on it, but I've always loved it. I love the games. I love the simplicity. Gaming now, I think, especially how the market is, the biggest it's ever been. It's only getting bigger, and most AAA companies are only looking for franchises that can do $1 billion, which is an insane amount of money to get out of one project. But once the taste was
when you say AAA company, what do you? I assume that's not anti-aircraft artillery. What is?
I'm like the biggest publishers, like Rockstar, Activision, Blizzard, Ubisoft. Okay. These are now the biggest
and Disney's of computer.
Exactly, the franchises that have staying power, that collect a big audience, and then the gaming experience that's it's never too far away from experimental, and it's never too far away from like, well, this is the same thing we had last year, just like newer and different. So the Grand Theft Autos, the Assassin's Creeds, the Call of Duties, and anything Marvel and Disney that has a franchise that's loyal.
Oh, don't get me started. I feel like it's like I like these movies for a while, but it's like after episode 50 years, it's like, come up with something new.
We'll never get like 80s action movies that were their own dumb franchise for like one and done. It's Marvel forever. And the same thing's happening with gaming, and in contrast, it's way easier to look back at retro gaming and be like, wow, actually this experience was more wholesome. And I wholeheartedly agree if you just think about games now, but that's the industry. It was always to get you to play and make money.
Yeah.
The scale just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
So what? Let me ask you this. It's maybe a loaded question, but what is your favorite retro game?
It's probably.
How do you answer that?
I'm prepared to answer this. It's probably Duke Nukem 3D.
That's not even retro.
Look, I don't want to get into that, Pat, but we're at the 25 year. We hit that 25th year anniversary for that, I think, a couple years ago.
That's not right.
So, yeah. Came out in 1996. I was pretty young, had a computer as like this is the newest thing, this IBM 386. And wow, what an experience. So
it was interesting for sure. Certainly some things on that game that shouldn't repeat on a family podcast.
Yeah, I think I was in 5th grade, and when I saw them, I like looked around the room. I'm like, oh my gosh, my parents didn't see this. This is incredible. And Pat, to your comment, first thing I did was like have friends come over. I'm like, load this level, go to this area, look at this, and they're like, whoa.
Do you remember the one? I can't say everything on that game, but there was one. You go into this like one area, and on the TV, there's a little video of a white Ford Bronco.
Yeah,
that was hilarious.
I mean, active in pop culture, interactivity. The game really hit all the marks for, aside from like pushing technology, it just was charming in every way, either like grotesque or crude or just fun.
Yeah. Oh, so going along with that, since, I guess I wouldn't consider that retro gaming either, but it certainly is.
Yeah,
but,
it's DOS.
Now that you say it,
I mean, it's DOS now.
If I had to argue about this, and I don't want to argue about it, but if I had to argue about it, we still use x86 machines that could boot DOS. I'm on one right now. I can't, but we could boot DOS on here, and we can run. I mean, they won't run right because they cared about timing. There's problems.
Yeah.
But it's weird. It feels, in my mind, retro gaming started before, is stuff that I can't run on my computer directly today, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to argue it. I said I didn't want to argue it.
You don't have to, because I think someone tried to contain what retro was, and it was basically at least 2 generations old. Because console gaming everyone tries to contain console gaming in a way they can talk about it. So the Xbox 360 and that generation is now retro because it's like 2 generations behind, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Well, they don't make it anymore.
It's out of print. It's obsolete, out of print.
The games and the hardware to run it on, both are.
Yeah. So we can just meet in the middle and say it's vintage gaming, and then no one's upset.
Oh, that's gonna make me feel older. I bet. Well, if Duke Nukem is Duke Nukem 3D, not the 2D one that I also remember.
Right.
That's
is Wolfenstein 2D retro? That's definitely retro.
That was on the Apple II.
Yeah.
And other things. And other contemporaries.
Hey, so going along that, what is your favorite retro build? Is there a project that you think is just the pinnacle of your achievement?
It's probably this nonchalantly in the background.
So far, I should say.
Yeah, it's this design and how it was executed. So I stopped like chasing to make an arcade, and like during the pandemic is when I was
what do we have there? Where are you, and what do you have there behind you?
Yep. And you don't have to point because I'll put picture. I'll find.
I can give you a better angle, but this is why I pushed the YouTube channel, because this is all of these different designs are talked about. But behind me is a 2/3 scale arcade cabinet, so it's 2/3 the size. And the special thing about it is more like a kiosk or a shrine to older game consoles. So most of them, except I think 2, have a 13-inch tube TV, and they just have like a Nintendo 64, a Sega Genesis, a PlayStation 1 inside. So they are the console experience in an arcade presentation.
Okay. Nice.
And
So that you feel like that, yeah, I mean, that is your signature thing, is that 2/3 size arcade cabinet that, I guess you did, or you still sell to some extent.
the
If
plans are
that's-
free. The only thing I sell is if you watch the ad and don't have an ad blocker. So that's all my compensation.
Nice.
Yeah, I saw you cutting these exact cabinets on a CNC. Are you doing
Yes.
that in house yourself? Were you? I mean, I know you're not selling them now, but
That's all me doing that work, and that was just really to produce the ones in the basement and make sure the design was lived through. So I mean, you can build something once, and there's like things you want to fix, change, and once you get to like version 3, it's pretty well refined. But I did 6. I actually did 12 of these, but did 6, and yeah, I was like, every single thing I've checked and made the corrections that I wanted to. It goes together in the way I imagine, lived in the user experience. So the plans are totally free, and this is what you can build.
And we're in your basement. Is that correct? You said that?
Yeah.
Okay, because it looks like you're at like a bowling alley or some fancy arcade or something. It looks
Thanks.
Looks
Christmas
like a lot of
lights, and then these are the joists for the floor. Yeah, it's got that vibe.
Okay.
Yeah, I unfortunately I don't own a CNC. It's they're very expensive.
yeah.
And
I've always dreamed about having a CNC big enough to make arcade cabinets.
Yeah,
But
and let me tell you, that dream just kind of like festered with me. So I found a way to get to them. One was the makerspace, but again, that makerspace went bankrupt in 2017. I think they just locked their doors because they were like, we're out of money, so sorry, can't come in.
It's a hard
just like
business.
a normal gym.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. I mean, like, Tech Shop was very cool. The membership was, we're talking like 2014 level of inflation. So membership was like $120 a month, which is a lot of money if you're working full time and you can only tinker like one weekend out of the whole month. So
Yeah.
it was hard for them to attract members. And yeah, then suddenly when they had money problems, membership went to like 150, and that only compounds. Like, people are like, it's not for me, I can't do this.
Yeah.
But the landscape
sure.
was like, most of the big people that utilized it the most quickly learned like everything they could in a year, and ended up like building their own shop, leaving or making the next step in their job. So that's what you want people to do, but to keep it funded didn't work out.
Well, listen, Ryan. We usually take a coffee break in the middle here. I feel like this is probably a good time to kind of take a coffee break, regroup, and we'll come back. And after that, maybe we can ask you a little more about your book. I really want to ask you about the indoor mountain bike park that you've worked with. Just some stuff about YouTube, whatever we could think of. I'm sure we'll come up with some awesome stuff. So we'll be right back.
Sure.
I'm supposed to introduce this. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the coffee break. This is the part where Jeremy and I take a break here because you never know if we're going to have to wrangle in the podcast halfway through to stay on topic. And we also stop here so that we can thank all of our lovely patrons on Patreon. And Jeremy has a list, and he is going to read them to you while I count them.
I do. And also, this week, we're actually doing the coffee break after the show, and everything went pretty well. I mean, we did wrangle, we did discuss, but I felt like things were all good.
Yeah.
So, anyway, let's get our top 5 or so Patreons. So first of all, we got Carl. Carl, I saw you Tuesday this week. I didn't say hi to you, but I didn't mean to slight you. Thank you for your patronage. Michael Sizer, thank you for your patronage as well. Raptor, creatively spelled. We love that you spell the A as a 4. 4 as an A?
4 is an...
Whatever.
Yeah.
Stuart Morrow, thank you so much. standard spelling as far as I know. So good for you. Brian Moses, and of course, Positive Waves. We appreciate all of your patronage. It's just awesome. So
Makes
thanks
us
so
feel
much.
like we're doing a good job.
Yeah. And Pat, if somebody did want to go to and support us monetarily, how would they do that?
They would go to patreon.com/createinvent, all one word. And you don't even have to go to Patreon and spend money. We would be excited if you just click the little like button in whatever podcast app you are using on iTunes, on SoundCloud, or on YouTube. Leave a comment. All that stuff. Even if you just leave a comment that says, I saw the coffee break, I'm excited to leave a comment because Pat will be excited to read it. That would be fine.
You know, speaking of that, I was listening to our podcast. I generally do that on an app called Podcast Addict, you know, for whatever that's worth. And I saw there was like a thumbs up thing that I hadn't done in our own podcast, and I hadn't even thought about it. So,
did you go back and do all 52 episodes?
Well, I should. I don't know that I will, but the last one got a thumbs up for me at least. So I think this one will too. So
good. Jeremy likes this episode already. And he really does.
I like it already.
We got to the end and he had a good time, I could tell.
All right, we'll get you back to your same create channel.
Or Skeletor will do it. I think Skeletor does the same thing. Until next time.
Until next time, He-Man, or I don't know what he says.
There's fantastic memes of that. They're terrific. Look, if you like memes, look the Skeletor ones up.
The most common feedback I get is on YouTube, and it's always like, oh, I don't have these tools and stuff, and it's such a hard conversation to like break, because you don't need a CNC that fills your garage. Yes, it's nice, but also if you're just starting, that's an overwhelming tool, and your skills probably aren't ready to actually utilize it. So getting started is like getting started now. Exactly. A jigsaw and a router with the flush cut or flush trim. That's it.
I was thinking for the team molding. That was the...
Well, yeah. If you rough cut with a jigsaw, then the flush trim will make a perfect duplicate.
Yep.
But yeah, you'll need that team molding, because otherwise it looks weird. Yeah, I've never owned any tool more than I think like $200, just because I've always wiggled my way into either a makerspace or somebody that has the tool, because you end up meeting these people if you put your passion out there. It doesn't always work out, but when you have 10 years of skills versus like I'm just starting, where do I start? I'm like, wow, just start. Like, it doesn't, you'll get there. It's the attitude that gets you to that 10-year mark or 20-year mark. It's always about the attitude.
Well, one of the things we've learned from our blogs is that people are afraid to start.
Yeah.
People, they're not brave enough to make that first effort where, they'll start building from there. And if you can push people off that, well, I guess you're not pushing them off a cliff. That's what I was going to say. That would be terrible. Don't push them off a cliff.
It's putting yourself out there. And I think people's failure in their own eyes is the biggest debilitator, because the first thing you make is probably going to be bad, but you're going to be happy, you're going to be proud, and you're going to know how to make it better, and then that's the cycle.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is you wrote a book, and you touched on that, but what's the process like? That sounds fascinating.
It's excruciating.
Okay.
So YouTube and the website and big special secret is paying for Google ad clicks. So you get pushed to the top in search results. So arcade kit, arcade cabinet, DIY arcade. That really helped me basically accidentally land a book deal, because it was the book is Retro Gaming with Raspberry Pi by A Press Media. So you can find it on Amazon, and I don't know if it's still in Barnes & Noble, but it was there once, and I was like, wow. But this is a book just on how to set up a Raspberry Pi for like a retro gaming setup, and I also talk about how I built and show you the process of the mini arcades for Raspberry Pi if that's something you want to attempt. So this all happened just because I had all my stuff out there, and the Raspberry Pi carries itself in popularity and books and publishing. And A Press Media was writing a book, and their main person just had to drop out. They couldn't finish the book. They had 2 chapters out of what they wanted was like 6 or 7. So they just cold called me through an email, and I was like, oh, wow, a book? To say I wrote a book? Yeah, I'll do it. So it was the worst summer of my life because I had to push out like 30 pages of basically like hard technical stuff because I had to produce all the CAD as well, which was any electrical schematic, any 3D model of like how I'm putting stuff together. And I had to do that in about 4 months because that was their deadline. And that was the condition of like, it's got to be finished. Otherwise the book is scrapped. So yeah, I was like, I'll do it. Because
I'll do it.
I don't know how hard this is going to be. So I did.
So
yeah.
do you feel like it's paid off monetarily or at least mentally, maybe? I mean,
Well,
you could say you've written books. That's kind of cool. But
yeah, so I mean, publishing, I don't know much about it, only having done it once. But as an author that my name doesn't sell books, the negotiation was like, this is what you're going to get or nothing. So I got really, really low, like compensation, basically like, I think 5% off the sale price of a book. So like the book's $30. So I get like $1.50. Great.
All right, I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's not. It's because, whatever's going to the publisher and then a significant portion more goes to the other person who wrote, who started the book but didn't finish it. But their name has what carries way more weight. So that's just how it's going to work. But I did get a lot of the royalties up front because, it's 4 months of basically, like 30 hours a week plus my full-time job, like just pushing this book together. So you get the royalties up front. Did it pay off? It wasn't for the money. It was to say, I wrote this book, so I guess I know what I'm talking about. If it ever came up like that, like I needed that to prove it. It was just an opportunity to do something, and I want to do it.
I wrote the book on retro gaming.
Exactly.
You literally have.
Which has never come up organically, but I like to have it in my head just to be like, you think you know? Oh, I wrote a book. But But
I know.
Exactly.
I'm on the cover here
of
this book. Well,
I'm on the cover of a
interesting.
book, Jeremy. Except it's not me. There's a guy who writes UFO conspiracy books in print on bookshelves with my name. We just have the same name.
Well, I mean,
that seems like a conspiracy to me.
I still don't have them on my bookshelf, and I feel like I should.
Yeah,
Nobody would know.
Probably should.
Yeah, I it's weird. It was so much work. I wasn't super, like, after it's published, they like send you like 10 copies for yourself for you and family, and I'm like, I don't care. It's so much work. It was so grueling, but it's cool. I have it.
So would you do it again? I guess probably not, or maybe.
On the same topic, no, because it was such technical stuff. If it was more like thoughts and feelings, yeah, sure. But technical writing, pretty hard to produce, so no.
Okay, so we might see a Deep Thoughts with Ryan Bates book.
Yeah,
come out. Okay.
Like our discussion early on, like vintage gaming.
That'd be interesting. I mean, that'd be more like a pamphlet, though, I guess.
Well,
not that you propose this book.
There are decades of retro gaming, vintage gaming to talk about, Jeremy.
Oh,
decades.
yeah. And I mean,
there's no end.
The magazines that come out that are new retro, those are cool. I like those.
I saw a magazine. It was like World War II magazine. I'm like, there is nothing new that happens in World War II at this point.
Right.
But I guess people are into it. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the wrong. That seems like a bad thing to be into.
Well,
I understand it. It's history and such.
Yeah, I mean, the best way was someone said, you can be romantic about it, and I think that just captures, like, sometimes it's hard to explain when you're just into somebody, and you can be romantic about stuff. So
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
I can't explain it, so I just go with that, and I'm like, I'll put that thought behind me and just move on.
Good enough. Pat, unless you had any questions.
Well, I want to know if you can write a book about indoor mountain bike tracks.
I would be the wrong person, but I guess we should segue on to the indoor bike park. I
want to ride half a Segway in your indoor bike park.
So it's only makes no sense. It's only, and many people have asked. It's only mountain bikes.
So what is this, first of all? What are we even talking about?
Okay, let's back up.
I kind of know, but
so there is
you know better than I do.
I don't remember the square footage. It's like 2 city blocks though of old warehouses. So Pittsburgh has a lot of abandoned warehouses from steel mills that just went under. After like the late 80s, that was the end of it all, but it was even before that. So anyway, we have a lot of empty buildings that the city is like, please do something with this. The indoor bike park is, I think, about 6 years old. It's called the Wheel Mill. It's a magical place. Take an entire industrial warehouse, gut it, and put plywood jumps, ramps in it, but all built by experienced BMX and mountain bikers. So these jumps flow, the angles and adjusted velocities of like the starting heights are all done with experience and actual, like, this makes sense. You can learn good skills off this. You won't die. And that's this bike park. So it's mainly like BMX, but it has mountain bike trails. It has beginner trails. I can give you the layout of, they have like a 3-foot jump beginner section where you're learning. They have a pump track, which is like lots of rolling hills that you don't pedal. You just kind of push the bike into the downhill of it and you go faster. That's what a pump track is. There's a like technical mountain bike, which is like lots of logs and weird seesaws for a mountain bike and like slow technical balance. There's a mini ramp, which is essentially a half pipe, but just like a foot shorter from being 7 feet. It's 6 feet half pipe. And then a large room with jumps between like 6 foot to 10 foot in height. And that's this bike park.
Sounds awesome. I won't be doing the 10-foot jump anytime. Have you done the 10-foot jump? Or is that your thing?
Yeah. So I started, I think 6 years ago. I've never ridden like this before. I'd always like been into the X Games when I was little. I'm like, oh man, I want to do that. And then I moved to one side of the city, and at the time I was 30 years old. So now I've put my age out there. And I was only like 10 minutes away from the bike park. And I just was like, okay, I'll just go once because there's no excuses now. And well, then once turned into like 4 months of renting a bike just to like, can I get any better? Can I get the wheels off the ground? And that worked okay. And so I did most of my practice on the pump track, which is really about speed. And they had no instruments to like measure your time. They had told me like when they do competitions or contests, they have a guy with a stopwatch. And, there's some error in there when it comes down to the, fractions of a second. Exactly. So I offered like, hey, I can make you an automatic lap timer to help you out. Because like I like this place. And sometimes, when you like something, helping it grow benefits everybody. So I was compensated with free membership, and they basically knew like, if that guy gets better, he'll always stick around, and they won that one. So I've been a paying member for like 5 years now.
It wasn't a lifetime free membership.
No, it was I think it was 6 months, because basically that was the cost of parts to build it. equated to like 6 months of membership at the time.
How much is a membership there?
If you pay for a year, it's about $42 a month, like after taxes.
Okay, like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right?
Yeah. And so if they have rentals there too. So if you don't have a bike, you can rent a bike. And that's actually how like I discovered like, oh, this is what a good bike is. It's not from Walmart. It's
so did you ride BMX or do you have mountain
I
bike?
rode BMX for like 3 years there. And then my skills the plateaus of skills kind of go all over the place. But I invited a couple friends who were like mountain bikers or road bikers. So they picked what's called a dirt jumper, which is 26-inch tires, and the frame cuts down real hard right to the back tire, which means like the seat, it basically is sitting on the tire. You have a lot of leg room.
Right.
So when I went with them and I would like, oh, let me try your bike. That's cool. And after like a month, I was like, wait a second. I think a dirt jumper is better for me. I'm over 6 feet tall, so BMX can either work or not work. It's just kind of if it feels good. So I switched to a dirt jumper, and I've been riding that for about 3 years, and it's the best.
Very neat. So I mean, I find this fascinating because I rode mountain bikes for quite a while when I lived in the.
Jeremy, do you take your mountain bike off any sweet jumps?
Not anymore, and not that sweet. I think 3 feet was the high limit for me. I lived in Florida now, so there's not a. I mean, actually, supposedly there are some places you can go, but I just haven't done it. I ride my mountain bike on trails and, like cyclocross, I guess would be the right way to put it. But man, I would love to try something like that. At the same time, I'm thinking like, man, maybe I'm like old enough I shouldn't do that.
See, okay, so yeah, that's the attitude thing. So the way the park is built, everything can be rolled over. The tires never have to leave there. You can just treat it like a really big hump or hill.
Right.
And it's hitting that hill not maybe a dozen times, but maybe like a couple hundred times is where your confidence and your like bike skills start to like track in the same direction. And then you like, pop that tire off like maybe a centimeter, and you do that for a month, and you're like, 2 centimeters, and then you're flying. But I will say, like, I started when I was 30 and didn't have any of these like base skills. Right. I still and always ride with a constant fear of getting hurt. That will never escape me, and it's what I'm always like envious of, like the younger kids, because they started when they're 6, 12. They don't have the fear of like crippling themselves and not being able to go to work. So you can ride a little bit differently, but you can still enjoy yourself.
Nice. I mean, when I was riding more, when I was in in South Carolina, more mountainous area, not that it's that mountainous, but I got to where I could take a 3-foot drop pretty easily. But man, there was a part of the place I usually rode. It was like an experimental forest. Anyway, they had a lot of trails. There's one section that was designed for downhill riding, and I would do some of it. But there was one thing. It was like a diving board, and I could be in my mind, but it seemed like it was about 20 or 30 feet to the bottom. And we saw some people go off this, and it's like, that is insane. And I mean, I don't know where I'm going with that.
I occasionally see pros or ex-pros or semi-pros in the space, and the skill ceiling and gap to like the average rider is there's little comparison, because they ride with such a high skill and such a high, I guess, like zest for just shredding those jumps. Like the ceiling is a problem for them because they could hit it if they wanted to.
Like you mean
the literal
ceiling of the warehouse, like where the beams are supporting the roof. The jumps are placed like in between the gaps, but I mean these guys could hit it if they wanted to, and
that'd be a pretty gnarly. That would really be really painful.
Hopefully,
because I mean you hit on the top and then you hit on the bottom. That's not normal.
Yeah, but one of those you don't hit as hard as the other. You're
That's
already
true.
slowing
It would
down.
just be like a light tap, and then you're like, wow, I'm going sideways. But
man.
I'd say when you get it, when you see that, you don't feel like underskilled in a sense of like, I'm not motivated now. You feel pumped up. So it's a nice community, and it's nice to see even such a high threshold of skill in person. It's a great motivator. And everyone there is so engaging and nice and encouraging, because, they're still empathetic of like, yeah, I started just where you're starting, and you're starting, so you'll get there.
Oh.
It's really fun.
If I ever get to Pittsburgh, I would love to do that.
Yeah, let me know. I'll ride with you.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I still don't. I don't know when I'm gonna stop, because it was one of those activities that I kind of was always looking for, something you do that you don't think about anything else when you're doing it, and it's nice to have one of those like brain reset things.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah.
I guess it's nice to hear too that I'm 6'3", 6'4", so if you're pretty tall too, I guess they have bikes,
Yeah.
bikes that are
So
big enough for.
You'll want, look at the dirt jumpers. Those are 26-inch tires, and those just give you a lot of leg room to maneuver the bike and take jumps. Basically, your legs are springs, so your knees got to bend. So the dirt
Right.
jumpers are designed for that. But you can still ride a mountain bike with full suspension or hardtail and have fun there.
Tangentially related to this, I thought you made a bunny hop progress bar. I thought that was pretty ingenious. So like it's basically like a what's the well, like like a high jumper or a pole vaulter.
Yeah, it's
whatever.
it's a high jump bar, but for bikes. Yeah, so that was when we were in lockdown. Like the bike park closed, the gym closed, and I was like,
that's too bad.
yeah, there was nothing to do, other than watch YouTube, which was also
I feel like a gigantic space like that would be ideal for a
yeah,
pandemic,
but
maybe not.
Exactly. But I mean, when all the rules came down from our governor, that was essentially like it was classified as an amusement space. So it was not on the list of able to be open. So it was closed for like 4 months. So I pulled my bike out of the storage, like, because you can store your bike there if you pay for that. So I took it home, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll just hop on some curbs, to get my fill. Basically, like, focus on the hard.
That's what I used to know how to do when I was small.
It's a sweet skill. Like, honestly, again, like, you mess it up, like, you're going down like a cheese grater on that pavement.
Because I mean, pointing back to retro gaming, on Paperboy, if you hit the curb, you're dying.
You're done.
I don't know. Okay,
yeah,
you guys remember that.
You don't fully commit to hopping a curb. So this is all I was doing, like, downtime at work when I wanted to just, uncheck from being in front of a computer. So I ended up making that like high jump bar to like, well, because I was under that impression, like, well, if I can't go to the bike park for like 4 months, my skills are going to regress. So if I focus on fundamentals, I'll have a better foundation. Yeah, it actually is true. It's totally true. So the high jump focuses on like super precise muscle memory, and I just did that for way too many hours.
Nice. Yeah, every once in a while, like I can bunny hop my mountain bike. I can do it pretty well with clips and full suspension, but now I don't use either one, and it's like now it's like, like 3 inches or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think I average like 6 inches, and that's all it is. Because I mean, when I was hitting plateaus of like in the bike park, like I couldn't just get over the big jumps. It was coming to terms with like, you got to practice more than once a week, because that's all I was doing. I'd go like every weekend. So I would go 3 times a week, and I would just drill the thing I was stuck on. And it was only until doing it 3 to 4 times a week where you break through that plateau. So don't be upset if like you're only doing a little bunny hop. It's just because you're not committed to going past that plateau.
I feel like we're going way too deep into this for this particular podcast, but this is a huge interest of mine. I don't know. I love riding bicycles, and they're mechanical, so that's close enough, right?
And bicycle maintenance is important, everybody. So if you do this kind of torment to your bike, especially when you're learning. You're going to like case every jump, and you're going to put shockwaves through that bike that make things come loose that you didn't know could come loose. So please, if you don't know bicycle maintenance, get your bike inspected like every couple of months at a bike shop, or just like talk to somebody who knows, and touch your bike, feel your bike, because if those spokes start to get squished, you're going to mess yourself up. And that I learned that the hard way.
It's pretty reasonably priced to get your bike work done at a bike shop too. When my wife got an electric bike, her shifter wasn't working quite right, and I didn't really understand how to adjust it. I tried and I didn't do a good job, and it was not expensive to get that.
Shifters are tough to get right, but you know how I fixed that?
Did you take it to the bike shop?
No, I
got a new
took
bike.
Took my shifters off and turned it into a single speed.
Yeah, all right.
I got rid of the shifters altogether, which you can do in Florida because it's all like flat.
Yeah.
Here, so
Yeah,
Jeremy, it's
Pittsburgh-
flat here, but our bike path has there's about 15 miles of bike path right behind my house, like paved. You could drive a car on it, but you're not allowed to. But it's wide enough to drive a car on.
right.
And there are some actual hills on there that they've paved into it. And it's tough to get up them if you're...
It's like, why do you ride a bike? Why do you even ride a bike? You ride it for exercise. So, if single speed is getting you what you need there,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? It's like, what's your motive?
Yeah, you ride it for you. That's all you have to answer to. But yeah, when you get into brands and like, oh, I got these new bars. Look at these grips, these pedals. Yeah, that's all aesthetic stuff. Cool. I'm glad you are into that. But I just rode it for fun, and it helps.
If it's single speed, is it literally single speed, or did you just pick one of the existing sprockets to put the chain on?
So I pulled the shifters out.
And like you picked third gear and said, that's my gear now.
Well, yeah. Well, pretty much. Like, I don't know. That bike. It's like the bike of Theseus. It's like everything's been replaced on it, and it's still the bike I had 10 years ago, but it's like a different bike at this point.
Wait, Jeremy, I have a question for you. How many bikes do you own?
One fewer than I'd like, right? Isn't that the right answer? No. I have two bikes. One is the one I pretty much ride around, and the other one it's a full suspension, like more of a mountain bike, heavy hitter. But it's actually the smaller of my two bikes. So during the pandemic, since you couldn't get a bike, I actually set it up so my wife could ride it. But yes, I have two. What about yourself?
Two. And my follow-up is either Pat or Jeremy. If you own a bike, do you store it indoors, like in a climate-controlled space?
I store it in my garage, which is not climate controlled, but
okay, I was
indoors.
Curious.
What about yourself?
I do. I love my bike. I could never put it in like the shed and make it feel like that. So I break it in the house, and I get yelled at all the time. But
okay,
yeah.
Well, that's
our garage doesn't get that cold or that wet.
All right. Well,
I have seen a tool rust out though. There was a drill that got rusted, on the gears on the inside.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. I just couldn't treat my bike like that.
I keep my wheel in the house though. It's in the living room of all places.
But I'll also tell, like, my shed is one of those erect it yourself Rubbermaid plastic. Like it's. So I just I can't do this.
My friend Joe built a shed in his backyard. He called it a shed, but it had a toilet, plumbing, electricity, air conditioning. But he said it was a shed.
Lots of sheds have toilets in them. It just depends if it was plumbed.
This one's plumbed. Yeah, this was plumbed.
That's modest guy or just way too skilled.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just that's the word to use, I guess. I don't know.
The building behind the house is
a shed.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Ryan, we man, it's been fun talking to you. Is there anything else you'd like to cover that we haven't talked about today?
I don't think so. This is everything. I mean, just if you're interested in what I do, please check out my YouTube channel. It's just YouTube/Retro Built Games, or you can just find me like Ryan Bates Arcade on YouTube, and eventually you'll sort it out.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and
we'll have
Retro
a link
Built
in the
Games
description wherever they will allow us
please
to do that.
Yeah, and Pat, where can we find you?
Oh, you can find me at my website, Jeremy, or in my office here. I'm here most days,
nice,
every day. But my website, it's patshead.com. We'll put that in the description. And it's got links
Right.
to all the other weird places you can find me. I'm around. If you Google my name, you're going to find UFOs, or there's a comedian now with my name who's getting
Oh.
famous. So
Like the
that's-
hardest
Yeah.
career is a comedian's, right?
I believe.
I mean,
you.
I would think neurosurgeon, but I suppose
Well,
I don't know.
I mean,
That's a whole other debate.
Oh,
Yeah,
I could be a neurosurgeon, Jeremy. It's not hard. It's just I
Yeah,
wouldn't
but
do well.
could you
You
take
know,
the criticism?
not many of my patients would survive.
Well, yeah, your patients aren't going to be criticizing you afterwards.
No,
so,
never.
you know.
I've never
Yeah.
had a complaint from any of my patients.
Never had a complaint. And yeah, you can find me various. Just look up Jeremy Cook, or I'm on this podcast, and you should be able to find me. Thanks so much, Ryan. It was a pleasure talking to you. Pat,
really was.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you both. Thanks for having me. It was fun to chat.
See you later.
See you. Bye, guys.
I'm gonna find all the right buttons to hit. Oh, he's gone.
Oh, you just. Oh,
Pew! That's fine. Yeah, his stuff was. He was at 99%. He'll be at 100 or close enough. Yeah, everything went engineering instead of arcades. So I was. It's fine, but it wasn't. I wasn't as prepared. I think you did a fantastic job, Jeremy.